Hello folks, first of all, big apologies for not being about. So, why not? Why have I not been about? Several reasons really. I think if you saw my last video, you might recall that I said I had to stop the project with the Z1 engine. The idea was, if you remember, do go back and have a look, but if you remember, I was going to take the engine out of the Z1 over there, which I showed you in the last video, and once that engine was out, I was then going to put the one I showed you in the back workshop into that bike, and then we're going to do the final phase, which was a complete strip down of the Z1 engine that came out, limits and fits, tolerances, the works. I haven't been around, and the reason I haven't been around is because we've had a few issues with the motorhome. I did mention it briefly when we were talking about the Z1 project. And what's happened? Well, it's amazing what's happened. It really is amazing how bad things can go. We started off taking it to a garage not far from here, and when I said to them, see what you think, really helpful guy came out and we went for a test ride. And when we done that test ride, he said much the same as I felt. Number one cylinder was giving problems, and I had to clear the faults on an onboard diagnostic checker, which you can plug into the dash. I expect many of you use them. And it came up with a code, and I would clear that code, and for quite a long time, probably about 6 months, it was fine. Everything was okay, and then it came back, and I thought, right, I've got to get this checked out. Got it checked out, talked to a couple of people. They said, well, it could be an electrical connection problem. So I took the connector off the top of the injector. By the way, it's a common rail system. Most diesels today are. So there's a lot of pressure behind that squirt on each injector, so I understand. And I cleaned the contacts and then put some I'll just get the grease. Put some of this grease on. A silicone grease lubricant, which is electroconductive, so it would give a better connection to stop any short on that particular injector. It's only a negative and positive connector. After doing all that and going through it, I ran it for a while and it seemed to be okay. And then we went down to Bristol to see family and a few customers and what have you. And on the way down, the engine started to make a bit of a shake. But I found if I could keep it at a sweet spot on the gas, it wasn't too bad. We got to Bristol and I thought there seems to be a bit of lack of power, but I knew that it wasn't mechanical in the sense that there was anything wrong with the crank, pins, con rods, etc. Something very, very, very serious mechanically inside the engine. I felt it was to do with injectors and firing. And got there, we spent our time there, but it was always in the back of my mind, hope it's going to be all right going back. Before I filled up with diesel at a big store down there, I thought I'd put some Red X in, some special stuff for cleaning it. There's other stuffs you can get, but we just happened to try that because we could get it in Costco. Put that in, tanked it all up, so it's mixing round now because the new diesel's going in there and tanking it all up. And I thought, well, okay, so pulled away and I jerked the vehicle a little bit so that it would mix it up. And I was hoping, wishful thinking, I was hoping that what would happen is that once that detergent diesel injector cleaner had got into the system, it would hopefully clean the injectors and we might be okay. No, it didn't happen. When we left Bristol to come back, I quickly realised after about 25 miles that it wasn't right. And I listened to the engine and I felt, first of all, that it might have been the shockers suspension where one of them had given way and the wheel was jumping up and down. But we checked that, looking out the window. I know it's a bit dangerous, but you've got to check it somehow. And the wheels weren't jumping up and down, so it wasn't that. It was definitely something wrong on the fuel system. That's what I felt anyway. Anyway, we limped it back, got it back, and constantly trying to phone various different garages along the way. No one could help. Didn't get anywhere with that. And I was amazed. I could find, again, that sweet spot. If you didn't give it too much gas and use the gears gently, it'd be okay. Which made me think, well, it can't be mechanical. I've got to be right on that. So after that, when we got back, I decided to take it to a local garage in Curtin, Commercial Fitters. Great bunch of guys. Took it in there, and from that point on, we started to find out things weren't as good as what we thought they were. Now, after going for a test run with a really great guy there, he was convinced that it was injectors, and I felt he was on the money there. And we agreed that let's get a new set of injectors bought, which is what we did. Cut a long story short, and it is quite long, those injectors were fitted. And I thought, oh great, couple of weeks, pick it up, be on my way. Rang them up. Yep, it's okay, we can come and get it. Went down there. Now when I got there, for those of you that know a bit about diesel engines, when they're cold, they clack. They make that diesel knock, and lots of people know about that, and that's acceptable because you're not getting, from my understanding, you're not getting a 100% true burn as the diesel is squirted from the injector into the cylinder, and as it warms up, so it gives a more uniform burn, and so that knock goes away. That's the theory of it, from my understanding. When I walked into the workshop, it was parked outside, and the engine was ticking over and it was clacking. And I thought, that clacking is a bit loud. So I said to them about this, and they said, well, we've been for a test run yesterday, started up, reversed it out, seems to be okay. I said, right, okay. I started to think maybe it's because it's new injectors and they're calibrated slightly different. There's no wear on them. Maybe that's why I've got the clacking. Anyway, paid the bill, came out, got in it, and I let the idle speed, bear in mind it's a 3-litre turbo diesel, I let the idle speed slowly go back, so we're in reverse, so we're going back, go back, go back, get a bit of room, went to rev to pull away in first, and the engine just raced. It just raced. I immediately realised that we had a runaway. So what's a runaway? A runaway can be caused by sump oil or the injectors, but usually sump oil, where it's pulling it through the system of the engine and then it's being fed basically back into the intake manifold, and so it starts burning its own engine oil. What can cause this? There's lots of things that can cause it. One of the main things, so they say, is if you get an oil seal gun on the turbocharger, the oil that goes into the turbo to keep it lubricated ends up being fed this side of the turbo into the engine, and so the cycle just gets worse. Eventually the engine will just rev itself either to pieces or blow up, and the only way you can really stop them, if you're really lucky, and that's to put it in top gear and dump the clutch. So you just put a load, if you like, on the engine in one go, and hopefully that may stop it. I was lucky here. There is a valve on the intake, like a butterfly valve. I turned the key off and it shut that valve, and maybe because the engine didn't get quite up to temperature, I've got no idea for sure, it managed to shut down. Anyway, all the guys come running out. What's going on? What's going on? And I said, well, I think we've got a runaway here, because the engine's just raced itself to a point where the revs went right up. I don't know what revs it reached, but it was really high. So they said, well, we better have it back in. So the theory was, after we checked the oil and looked at this and looked at that, we'll take the injectors out, send them back and get them tested. So I had to leave it there. and that was that. About a week after of leaving it there, I got in touch with the garage and said, how's things going? Well, we sent the injectors back and they've tested them and they say there's nothing wrong, they're fine. So I said, okay, so what's the situation? Well, they're going to come back, we'll put them back in and it should be fine. So about a week went by, rang them up, they still were working on it. I thought, how long does it take to put a set of injectors back in? At that point, we talked about how the injectors came out. Now, we had to get another company in to pull them out because, believe it or not, it was 12 to 18 tons of hydraulic pressure, because as probably a lot of you know, the injectors can seize when an injector, which is made out of steel, goes into an aluminium head. You get a chemical reaction and it's like a white powder, and it can seize in the head, and they can seize very tight. Anyway, the company that pulled those injectors out, they got them out. The garage cleaned it all up, and when the injectors came back after testing, they put them in. I rung them probably about a week later and said, how's things going? They said, you better come down, we got a problem. So I said, right, okay. Went down there and I said to them, what have you found? They said, well, it's still revving. When we tried to start it, it would still rev. So I said, what do you think it is? They said, we think it could be the turbocharger. How much is a turbocharger? I think it's about 480 quid. Don't quote me on that because it depends on your vehicle. So I said, right, we got no choice. Let's get a turbocharger. Let's get it on there, get it sorted out, because this is getting silly. So the turbocharger was ordered, came through, put it on. I rung up about a week later again. And how's it going? Is the turbo fitted? Everything okay? Yeah, we've done it all, but we've still got a problem. You better come down. So went down there again, got down there. I said, what's the problem? Well, you better come and have a look at this. Now, for you guys that are not into mechanics, bear with me, because it's a bit tricky, but I'll try and explain the best I can. When an engine is running, you never really get 100% seal between the piston rings on the compression stroke. There's always going to be a little bit of compression gas go down the side of the rings. The question is how much is permissible? You don't want a lot, but you're never going to get 100% seal. We looked at the engine, and one of the lads said to me, we've taken the feed off, which drains the oil from the top of the rocker box where the camshafts are into this side of the turbo, and there should be very little air coming out of this tube, very little pressure. And I said, okay. So they started the engine, and I put my thumb on the end of this tube, and you could feel it was quite a bit. I wouldn't say it was huge, but it was quite a bit. So I said, well, wasn't that checked before? They said, well, no, because we thought it was the turbo seals. Right, okay. So I said, well, has anybody taken the oil filler cap off to see if there's any pressure coming out of there? I thought you'd have done that before you ordered the turbo. Well, no, because we thought it was the turbo. So you didn't check the pressure coming out of the engine, which is called piston blow by the way, or blow past, whatever. You didn't check to see if there was pressure coming out. No. So we took the cap off, and it was like a fountain coming out of the oil filler cap. So what we can establish is that it's losing so much compression, it's going down the side of the pistons into the crankcase and blowing oil up through the engine to where the cams are and through the filler cap, and again also out the tube that was the drain off to this side of the turbo. So I said, so we spent money on we spent money on a new turbo. We've got 2 days labour, or a day's labour, and it's not that at all. I said, I don't understand what's going on. What could I say? I was pretty annoyed. But it got worse. The boss came out and said to me, He said, "Look, we've done as much as we can do with this. We can't do any more." I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I came in here running, and you advised it would be a straight job of changing injectors. Job done. And now it's hardly running. In fact, it won't run. I can't drive it because it's not right." So he said, "Well, I'm sorry, but there's nothing we can do. You know, we need the pits, and that's it." I said, "So you're throwing me in the river, basically?" "Well, no." He said, "Well, we'll suck up the price of the turbo, and we'll suck up the price of the labour, and that'll be it." I said, "Well, that's a start, but it doesn't really address the fact that the vehicle came in running, and now it won't run. It's in a really, really bad state. It's a lot worse." So that was it. So what happens there? Well, I was advised by them to take it to another garage. Can you believe it? I had no choice. Basically, they got me over a barrel. So they recommended a place. Well, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to take that recommendation because they'd let me down. How do I know the persons that they're going to recommend are not going to do the same? But again, what do you do? Anyway, I rung a company and they specialise in Fiats. They're Fiat professionals, Iveco professionals, commercial fitters, engineers. Got in touch with them, and the vehicle had to be towed. Cost me 360 quid by a rescue wrecker company, Arctic wrecking company that they use to rescue Arctics that go off the motorway into ditches and sort of thing. And we had to haul it onto a low loader trailer, Arctic trailer, which was fine. I've got a bit of experience there because I've got a class 1. Helped the guy sort it all out, got it on there, strapped it down, took it up to the garage. It was there for a while. They started to work on it. Now, from that point on, after talking to them and explaining what had happened, the chaps there were really keyed up on this engine and Fiat Ducato vehicles in general. And they said to me, "Well, there's two ways we can look at this. We're not sure about it, so it may change, but we can look at what we've got, do some tests, see what we got for ourselves, and then make some sort of diagnosis on where we're going to go and how we're going to repair it." And the first thing they needed to do was check the amount of pressure coming out of that oil filler because of the piston blow-by, which they did. And I spoke to their foreman mechanic there, who's a great guy, and he said it's supposed to be, I believe if I remember, he said it's supposed to be 2 bar, and it was 22 bar. So we know that the amount of piston blow-by was immense, the amount of gas going past the pistons. So we knew something was damaged. So we discussed the procedure of what we could do, and we ended up coming to the conclusion that we've got to get the engine out. The engine's got to come out. So, engine comes out, and I said to them, when we take that head off to look inside those pistons or in those bores, I'd like to be there because I want to see what's going on. Why did I need to be there? Why did I want to be there? Well, let me just explain a couple of things here. There was 2 companies involved in this project initially. The first garage at Curtin and a second company that specialises in removing injectors. Okay? Now, it's very easy to get a situation arise, and be warned on this one, because I wouldn't want to see this happen to anybody. It's very easy to get a situation where one can blame the other and you end up with ping pong. Or we done this, but we weren't responsible for that, and they done that, and they're responsible for that, so we can't be held responsible because they may have done it, and so it goes on. So I was very worried about this, and I said to the head mechanic at the company that's dealing with it now, what do you think we may find? Because my beliefs are that when they took those injectors out, some foreign body may have gone down the injector well into one of those bores. He said, "Well, we don't know. We don't know." I said, "Well, as I said, when you take the cylinder head off, I'd like to be here and have a look. About 2 or 3 weeks later, I got a call saying we're going to take the head off. We got the engine all apart, all the subsidiary parts off the engine. We're going to take the head off tomorrow morning. So I said, great, I'll be there. I went there and I ended up helping the chap who was doing the job. Not a great deal, just got my overalls on so I don't get covered in grease and crap and all that. And we lifted the head off, and what we saw was quite strange. Now, bear with me on this. It's an aluminium head, it's a cast iron block. When we took the head off, we cleaned up the pistons, the crowns, what they call the tops, the crowns of the pistons, with a bit of paraffin and a rag. And you can use a brush on them to get them reasonably clean. It's only soot. It's not like on a petrol engine where it becomes caked on really hard. It's only soot, and it's quite easy to clean away. And we cleaned all 4 pistons, and on piston 2 and piston 4 at 6 o'clock, in the same place, 6 o'clock. Bear in mind, I'm going to do a bit of a profile here. The engine leans forward in the van. So the lowest point, if it's going to puddle of diesel, would be at 6 o'clock with the head on. And at 6 o'clock on the top of the piston, there was like small bits of pebbling where someone had been there like tapping it with a centre punch or something, little bits of pebbling. And we couldn't work out what it is. And I said to the mechanic, what do you think that could be? He said, it looks to me as if that's heat. It's got hot in those spots and the aluminium has started to melt, and that has gone down on top of the rings. The rings have moved, and so they're on an angle rather than being square to the bore. They're on an angle, and when we looked at the bore, it scraped grooves in the bore, on the wall of the bore, on those 2 cylinders, 2 and 4. And I just looked at that with total disbelief. And I thought, this could not have been done. This was not like this during general use, because the engine wouldn't run otherwise. I mean, that's the way I saw it. So I thought, well, where do we go from here? Well, there's going to be some video of what we found. I'll tell you that. I will show you that video, and I'm going to put it together, because I really don't want people to go through this, because it has been worse than a nightmare, and it's also bloody expensive. So, after seeing all that, the head mechanic said to me, he said, we'll do a test. We'll just do a test to see. And I've done this on motorcycle engines where you turn the head upside down and you put a bit of paraffin or petrol if you've lapped the valve, so you can check whether it leaks past the valves. Gives you an idea of whether the valves are a good seat. We turn the crank, whoops, move my pocket. We turn the crank on the engine so that all 4 pistons will level halfway up the bore. 1, 2, 3 and 4. And then he poured paraffin into each bore. And the idea was to see the levels of the paraffin go down on each bore. And 2 and 4 just went like that, woof. So we knew in relation to the time it took for the level of paraffin to go down in cylinder 2 and cylinder 4 against 1 and 3, which more or less held its own, we knew that there was something wrong, something seriously wrong with those bores. I said to him, what's the way to go here? He said, well, you can get this engine that's only done 48,000 miles. We can take the pistons out. You can take the block away. You can get it rebored to a new set of pistons, what they call first oversize. And from there, we can rebuild the engine. But there's a problem with that. And the problem is that you're back to that same old thing. One company working on the engine and another company doing the engineering. And there's room for that ping pong if anything goes wrong. One blaming the other. Well, we didn't do this. We only done that. We didn't do that. We done this. That's not our... And this is what happens. So I went away and thought about what we could do. And I said to the head mechanic there, what do you think? What would you advise? And after a lot of thinking and weighing up the pros and cons, to get the warranty from Fiat with the work they were going to do, they wouldn't give us a warranty if anybody else had worked on that engine. So reboring it out to the first oversize was not really an option if we wanted the warranty. Okay, you could say, and you're absolutely right if you're thinking this, the people that did the rebore, they would warranty the engine. And fair enough, they would. But if we put that engine back in and there's any problems with it, you could be in that ping pong game. Well, we only bored it out, or we only fitted it. And so one's blaming the other. No one's taking responsibility. I wanted to eliminate that, so it's all under one roof. So I said to the manager of the company, who's Fiat Professional, Iveco Professional Garage, I said, what can we do? So he said, well, I can look into prices of a new engine. They came back and they said, that's if Fiat will let you have one. Well, there's some sort of discrepancy about the age of the vehicle and if the vehicle's under warranty, if it's under 3 years old. I can't remember the ins and outs, but it turns out that we wouldn't be able to get an engine because of the age of the motorhome. And if you could get one, they said it would be 15,000. 15,000. I'll say that again. 15,000. Unreal. So I went away pretty cheesed off, I can assure you. So I said to the manager, there must be another way around it to keep that warranty with Fiat. They said, well, I'll talk to Fiat and see what we can come up with. And I have to take my hat off here. Fiat came back, well, the manager came back and said, Fiat will do one, which is what they call a remanufactured engine. And I said, right. It's basically an engine which is checked, serviced, remanufactured, reconditioned to the Fiat standard limits and fits, all the tolerances, and it comes with a head, comes with the camshafts. There's a few things you've got to buy on top, but that's what you get. And that was for £5,000. So it's a no-brainer. It's going to raid our savings, but we got no choice. So that was ordered. So where are we now, folks? We're at a point now where the engine is there. The chief mechanic has worked on it. He's taken all the subsidiary components off the old block and put them on the new engine. And they've cleaned them out, of course, putting them on the new engine, and it's slowly being built up with all its parts. And hopefully next week it will go in. Now, where does that leave us with warranty? Well, the fact is that the only thing that's left, which could be a fly in the ointment, are the injectors. Now, I spoke to a very helpful man at the injector company, which those injectors originally came from the first garage. And he said to me, we've tested them twice, we've tested them once, they're okay, but if you want to bring them back, we will test them for free, which I thought was outstanding service. So I picked up the injectors and I said to Fiat, I said, if I get a fresh report after these have been tested and they prove okay, how does that stand? Well, we're not sure. We need to talk to Fiat HQ. Okay, well, I'll get them done so that they're ready if Fiat say it's okay to use, because they're being tested for free. So I picked them up, took them to the tester, they tested them, got a fresh report, picked them up, took them back to Fiat. Now, at that point, I would have thought that the paperwork, the fresh report would have been acceptable, but Fiat say, well, we don't know what's happened to those injectors, and if something's happened to them which could have damaged the internals, even though they're new, maybe they got dropped. Maybe they're not right by the manufacturers on the day they were made. Who knows? But they said if you use those injectors, we can't really guarantee the engine, because using another set, they would prefer, and of course you guessed it, they would prefer for us to have another set of injectors from Fiat to eliminate any risk. And in a way it makes sense, because after all the labour and all the time and all the new components and the new engine going in, you really don't want to mess it up with what could be, even though they passed the test, what could be a dodgy injector. You simply don't know. So I wrestled with that for a couple of days, and really speaking, the decision was made for me because of the risk of all that work coming undone. So another set of injectors were purchased. Good, fairly good price. I mustn't grumble at that. That was quite good. And it eliminates it. So that's another thing we can knock off of causing more problems with this new engine, or remanufactured engine. I call it new because it's new to me. So that's where we are now. Those injectors should be delivered hopefully tomorrow. Chief Mechanic is still working on the final bits of sorting the engine out, getting it ready. They will put it in, they will get it secured, and before they put all the chassis, sub-chassis, blah blah blah, wheels, shafts, drive shafts and all that on, they're going to see if they can run it, just to make sure, because you don't want to go the whole hog of putting everything back if there's a problem. So that's where we are now. Now I know this is a long video, guys. I know this is a long video, but I felt it was only right for me to do this because I haven't been around for a while, and this is what I've been fighting with. And the reason for doing this video is to, first of all, apologise I haven't come back with the Z1 project. And the second reason is for any of you guys that have got a motorhome out there with a Fiat Ducato engine, and it doesn't really matter what size the engine is, I would say to you, get it serviced regularly. Get it serviced regularly, because if you don't, you may end up with the same problems I've had. And it's a bloody nightmare. It really is a nightmare. We don't know where we're going to go from here. We're hoping that we'll get the vehicle back, and we hope that it will run smoothly. They say it will, but proof is in the pudding, is in the eating. We won't know till we know. So I'm fingers crossed. I remain optimistic and hopeful. But that's what I've been up to. That's what I've been up to. And that's, as I said, that's why I haven't managed to do the Z1 project with the engine. But bear with me. Bear with me. When we get to a point where I feel happy and I've got my confidence back with the motorhome and the reliability back with the motorhome, then I will start that project. But as I said, please bear with me. Oh, just a couple of other things I'd like to drop in. On top of that, both of us caught COVID during all this fighting with the motorhome and what's happened. And my other half went down with it pretty bad. And then I got it. I was very lucky. I was very lucky. It just felt like, for me, it was about 3 days of having a heavy cold. But we've all had our jabs, and you know, that I think was the saviour. So there we are. So I'm going to stop blabbing on here, because I probably said way too much anyway. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and do a bit of, show you a bit of the footage of the engine when the head comes off, show you some of the footage of what we've got at the moment in the workshop where the work is being done. And I hope, well, I hope this gives you some help and advice about your motorhome, and how important it is to get it checked regularly, get it serviced regularly, and anything that's small that pops up, such as an injector fault on the engine, or anything silly, it's anything that you think is really trivial, don't leave it. Don't leave it. Get it done, because you could end up in the same situation as me. I'll speak to you later, and I'll give you the pieces of video to show you where we are with the engine. Thanks for viewing. See you later.